Well, joining us today is Kelly Warner, a fellow Penn State alum, Penn State grad, along with me, and she's now at ESPN with the ESPN Next program, working on SportsCenter as well. Kelly, thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, of course. Anytime I can talk about Philly sports, I'm there. Thanks for asking.
Yes, that's the other thing. You're a Philly sports diehard, a Philly sports expert, and I want to get into a lot of talk about the Phillies and the other Philadelphia teams. But first off, you were telling me just a little bit before we started recording. What's been the ESPN experience? What's that been like? I mean, you've gone big time on us, so what's it like?
Oh, it's been great. I really enjoy it. All the people are nice. I'm a big Disney fan, so I love being a Disney employee. And yeah, it's been great. I cut highlights for SportsCenter, and can't complain when I'm watching sports for a living.
That's a very good point. What's something that since you've been working there that you learned or found out about ESPN that someone who just watches wouldn't know or would find interesting? Something that's ooh, that's a nice little inside scoop for you.
I feel like they would just be surprised to know that the show they're watching in the highlights are just a bunch of 20-something kids in a room watching sports together.
So just a handful of you guys watching sports being like, all right, I'll edit that, I'll cut that, I'll put that in.
It's like you're in a sports bar, like us all just oh, did you see what happened in that game? Especially now with March Madness, everyone's reacting to the big games together and stuff.
And what's it like? I'm sure everyone, in there has their own, sports fandom and sports story, but I know Philly fans are a little more passionate. What's it like, being a Philadelphia sports fan, having to work, for a general national sports company?
Yeah, you said it best. Everyone has their own team, so we're all in the room oh, what team do you like? And then we're all making fun of each other's teams. And so, yeah, like you said, being a Philly sports fan, there's only a couple of us. And definitely when I say that, they're like, oh, and then there's a lot of Mets fans. There's a lot of being in Connecticut where there's, New York is right there. And then, Boston fans, Bruins and the Flyers. So, yeah, I'm always defending my teams. It's, just the regular day in the life.
Yeah, I feel like I always see a lot of times with national sports, at least with the on-air people, anyone from Philly, their fandom always shows through. They always let it shine through a little bit, like Lefko or other people who are from Philly. You always know they're from Philly. So I'm wondering if it's the same thing with sort of the behind the scenes people.
I made the joke of somebody that I'd been talking to at work for a bit, didn't know I was a Philly sports fan. So I was like, see, you didn't even know. So therefore I'm not obnoxious and terrible, right?
Yeah. So you were just blending in. They couldn't even tell.
Yeah.
Well, you know what, Kelly, I don't think there's anything wrong with being obnoxious to Philadelphia sports fans. So let's talk a little bit of Philly. How excited are you for opening day? The Phillies starting the season on Thursday, allegedly. Apparently there's some weather that could screw it up.
That'd be our luck, right?
How excited are you for this season?
Oh, so excited. It's funny, talking to my friends or even other podcasts I listen to, they kind of shared the idea of the way the last season ended. I was devastated to say the least, definitely was very upset. So I needed but I feel a big part of that depression is that you're going to miss them. I'm oh my gosh, all this fun and happiness is just over. And so you just didn't know what it was going to be coming into the next season because, we had the magic of 22 and then you going into 23, you're oh, we're going to carry that magic. I remember opening day, you're oh my God, we're national league champions. We're a good team now. And then, that started off badly, but then now you're okay, we just disappointed. What's the vibe now? But I think everyone's just back to being excited. And there's no bad feelings about, even with how mad I was last season, I've let it go and we're cool now. And I'm just excited because it's the best time of the year.
And what's interesting about this team, really just in the modern sports culture, a lot of times you don't see core groups really stick together that often. And it seems like there was potential this season for a lot of big names to go other places. And the Phillies really returned most of the same team that they've had the past 2 years where they've made these runs. Where do you where would you grade, or how do you think they did this offseason, kind of really not adding, but mostly retaining?
So I'll first have to say that I love Rhys Hoskins, so I was very sad to see him go, even though I knew this was happening. So it was still a good choice. Just when I'm happy we retained the core, even though we lost Reese, so that was sad. But number one goal was Nola and Wheeler like together as one was one goal, and we got both of them, and that was most important. And I think that the other moves we made, like with Merrifield and like even getting like Spencer Turnbull, like there were things that we needed and they're good additions. Like, yes, fans, you're like, oh my God, all these pitchers are on the market and like Jordan Montgomery's still out there. But you hear Dombrowski be like, no, I think like we can't have everything. Like, I think we're good. And so I think keeping we're lucky enough to have two aces. Like, I think keeping our aces was most important. So overall, we accomplished what we needed, even if it wasn't like as sexy as like as fans you think. Because I remember there was this whole time when we were like, Dave, like you're not doing anything. Like, what are we doing? But I'm definitely happy with the state of it right now, as long as everybody like performs as they should.
And as Phillies fans, I feel like we're definitely a little spoiled based on like the past, 3-4 years of off seasons where we're, or 5 years where we're adding a Bryce Harper and a Nick Castellanos, a Kyle
Yeah.
Schwarber, a Trey Turner. It's like we're just we expected every offseason, like, all right, who's the next, 200, $300 million guy we're going to get. And so for
Yeah.
that not to happen, I can understand the, sense of disappointment.
Well, yeah, especially because there's those huge trades going on everywhere else. But you're right, like we did that. Like we have the guys. So we're still in like a better place than most of those teams that did add, one big star or something.
Right. I'll hit you with the sports talk question, on the bottom of the screen. Are the Phillies better this year than they are last year roster wise?
Yeah. For sure. I think so.
Why?
Of course it's always like, last year I'm sure I thought, I feel like a big part of that is one, like Trey is probably gonna be a better Trey than last year.
You gotta hope.
I have a good feeling about that. I remember saying that about Nick Castellanos, and maybe he's just a streaky player because like he still was, but like he was our all-star. Like he is better. So and Trey obviously got better the next end of the year. So I feel like that will be a big step up. And then same with Nola. I'm hoping for regular Nola again. That will be the honestly biggest game changer. But I think having like Rojas now at the beginning of the season, I know he's struggling with his hitting, but like our outfield should already be better than it was if we have Pache too. And then having like a guy like what Merrifield, like just having some extra people in the bullpen and in the dugout, just like to come in and help out. I think that we're in a better place. Like, unfortunately, I think like having Reese maybe would be better for that other bat, but like he didn't play like all of last season, so I won't even include him. So, but no, I feel better about how we are now for sure.
Yeah, and I want to get into the Rojas stuff in a little bit, but I think with free agency, often, like you said, the new or the splash is what grabs people's attention. But you think about it, if someone's signing somewhere new, that means they're leaving somewhere else. So I think, like you mentioned in the beginning, like keeping Wheeler and keeping Nola makes us, just as good, if not better, because they're not going somewhere else now. So you're keeping two aces. Whereas, if we were to not have those two guys and then sign them both in one offseason, it would be, a tremendous offseason, an A++ because you're getting two aces. So it might, because it's familiar, it might not feel as good, but I think it is as good as signing as you can do.
Yeah, definitely.
All right, on Rojas, where do you sit on the Rojas Pache debate?
So like anybody else, like especially after last season, like I love Rojas, and you're all like, oh, you'll train over the summer, but like it's definitely really struggling with his hitting. Like I know me and my friends are like, he can't be in our lineup opening day. Like that being said, I'm still open to like giving him his time to grow, and I respect the opinion of like give him that time to grow on our major league roster instead of like in AAA. Like just let him make his mistakes, let him struggle. But then it's tough because Pache looked so good in spring training. So I think I'm glad that we let Jake Cave go and that both of them are making the roster. I think that was the best option. And now I think it's just see how it goes when we're actually playing in games. Because, spring training doesn't always carry over. And like I said, I think it might be better for Rojas's growth to experience it with us on in the majors. So we'll just have to see. But I mean, obviously I don't feel great about how he's hitting, but like he's the outfielder that we've been waiting for. with the Phillies, like, we've always struggled with center field, and like he's so great there. So I hope that he can just grow, because I really obviously love his defense.
Yeah, and I think I saw a tweet or something that said, Rojas, he does so much for you defensively that like even if he is an automatic out, in the lineup, you've got 8 other players that are making like $900 million that are, in this lineup to hit and to provide offense. So like if the amounts of like defensive runs saved like outweigh the like poor timing of his bad offense, then I think it's worth it. But on the same like
Yeah.
hand, like you said, like I don't know if Pache can be maybe, 3/4, half the defensive outfielder that Rojas is, but like twice the hitter, then I think you lean Pache. Like it's just it kind of I think it should be an open competition on
Yeah,
that
but I
sort
think
of.
what's important to mention, even though I'm definitely the type of fan who, I watch every game and like get mad if we lose. So, but that being said, you do get April, you get May. It's not like when we're in the Diamondback series and they know that Rojas is an automatic out and they're going to use that against us. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
it's okay to give them time to fail or to succeed when it's April, May. Like, it's okay to test it out and make it a competition when you have that time. Like, obviously, I like anybody else, I don't want us to start off bad like we've had the last few years, but like you said, he's not a terrible player. We're gonna save those runs in the defense. So, just if he has a terrible hitting game, Pache the next day, see what happens.
Yeah, and we kind of got caught in like an interesting scenario last year where he came on so late in the season and was hitting well in the regular season. So then
Yeah.
kind of Rob Thompson, and he could be criticized for this if you want, but like kind of got stuck in just trusting him and maybe trusted him too much in those playoff series. But like he only had, 2 months of, Phillies MLB experience. So there was not like a sample size. Whereas this year, like you said, you can let him play throughout April, May, June, July. And then if you get to the postseason race and he's still struggling at the bat, then you make some changes for the postseason. But yeah, I think
Yeah.
there's more time to feel it out.
Hmm. That is
All right.
Thompson's
On
thing.
top, say that again.
I was saying that is Thompson's thing, is his trust, whether that's good or a bad thing.
Yeah, he definitely trusts his guys. And what's been your now that it's more he's kind of settled in, he's is not no longer him taking over for Joe Girardi, and he's a couple years removed from the World Series appearance. Are you still do you ride with Philly Rob? Do you ride with Topper? Do you think he's the the long-term Phillies manager, or do you think it was maybe kind of a caught lightning in a bottle and he's maybe a little too old school? What do you think?
It is funny though that you asked, because my instant answer is yes. I still trust him and love him as a manager. But then there was that fear after last season, in the postseason, and he did the same thing that kind of happened in the season before, where I'm gonna trust my guys. I'm not gonna change the lineup. And then you saw that obviously used against us. And then you did have that fear of like, okay, like maybe like what if we're like putting all our trust in this guy and he's like not it? But I really do like him. And I mean, you can't pretend like all the wins that we've had and good playoff moves didn't happen just because some of them went wrong. And I can just hope that he learns from the mistake. Because not even just the mistake of trusting the guys and leaving the lineup in, because it's not his fault that all their bats were cold as heck. Like, you can't like always fix that. But it's things like, I think of putting Kimbrel in when he was
Yeah.
clearly getting lit up. But that's things where you're like, we're all fans watching and what are we thinking? So that's something that I'm like, I hope he just learns from that situation and doesn't do it again. But right now, he has not like lost me. I'm still a big Rob Thompson supporter. I think he's most important. Like, he's a great coach for the guys. Like, they all love him, and like the vibes are great, and like you can't trade that.
Yeah, I agree. I still ride with Philly Rob. I think the players love him. That's obvious, and they support him. The fans, for the most part, really enjoy him, and he has 20 plus years of baseball experience. He knows the game as well as
Yeah.
any other manager out there. I think it just comes to those spots where this has been his first couple years as the manager and in the playoffs, making a decision. Do I pull this pitcher? Do I bring in my closer who's struggling? Do I rearrange the lineup? And those are decisions he hasn't had to make in his 20 years, as an assistant coach, where now he's kind of been put in the spotlight to make those calls. And so I think he'll probably grow and learn, but I think in his
Yeah.
baseball, knowledge and his respect by the team, I think is top tier. So I think he's the coach of the future, and I think should stick it out with him through these Harper years and through the score of this team that we have right now. And
Yeah.
I think he's the guy.
Yeah. I totally agree.
Okay, we talked Rojas and Pache. Who do you are some, it could either be obvious or unsung players you think will be key for a successful Phillies season this year?
I think so. Yeah, in an obvious side, it's Nola. Like if he's back to being Nola, that will obviously be a whole world of difference. And then it's so funny now that I'm like, who needs to play well? Everybody comes to mind. I'm like,
Yeah,
if Nick Castellanos could
everyone.
like stay being good, that'd be great. If Kyle Schwarber could hit a lot, like that'd be great. I think the first people that came to mind though were like the daycare. I think that Stott, Marsh, and Bohm continuing to improve and bringing even more to the team is like such a game changer. Because like, yeah, we have Schwarber and you have Harper and you have Castellanos and you hope that they all do well and you trust that they will. But I think it's big on like people still don't believe in Alec Bohm. I remember last year, especially when everyone was like, "Oh my gosh, he added all this weight!" Like, "Oh my gosh," like you were excited for him to do better, and he did for like a bit, but then streaky. So I think if he can improve, especially like he's been better at third base, like you've even seen it in spring training that like if you become a great third baseman, that's awesome. And then Stott, I just think is a star. Like he's like my favorite player right now. I think he was underrated last year at his position, and I think that if he just continues that, like he's going to be on the list of best in the league.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, did you see it was the other spring training game? Joe Girardi said he can see him like winning a batting title. I think something like that.
Yeah, which I was like, "Shut up, Joe Girardi!" Like,
yes,
but yes, that's true.
you're right, but we don't want to hear it from you.
Yeah, we're like, remember when you would never play him? Yeah.
Shocking. Worst person makes great point. Yeah, that was.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the daycare is a good answer. I mean, with Alec Bohm, if he can be more consistent with his power, I think that adds a lot of explosiveness towards the middle or bottom of the lineup, depending on where he's set up. But to me, I'm with you. I think Stott is the key. And I'm also like a little bit biased. I love like the contact hitters, the guy, like I'm not like a power hungry type baseball fan. I love like a Derek Jeter, a Jimmy Rollins, like someone who's just like, they have the power, but they get hits. They earn walks, they get on base, they steal bases, like kind of the old school baseball. And I think especially, and he took this jump last year, but without Rhys Hoskins, someone who works a ton of at bats and works a ton of walks, having like someone like Bryson Stott who can work at bats and get little hits in a lineup full of Schwarbers and Castellanos and Harpers and Bohms, I think is the key. And he had a phenomenal season last year. Do you think he can match that and exceed it, or do you think there might be a little bit of a regression because he was so great for a good portion of last year?
I don't see why he would regress. I think especially because he's so young. Like I think he's just growing and improving with experience, especially just at second base. Like I think that like that alone is definitely going to improve because I don't see why he would regress. And then hitting, you never know. And I'm so with you though. Like I think that's the most important thing. Like, when you watch games, especially you've seen how cold we get and you're watching them just swing for home runs and you're like, stop, can you just get a hit? Stott's the one that I'm like, he's going to get a hit, or at least he's not going to swing at the first thing. He's not going to strike out as often. You know what I mean? So, and he has a kid now, dad power. That's a real thing.
That's every time I feel like an athlete as a kid, they come out stronger. So that's a good point.
Yeah. I really think he's going to have a great year.
You talked about the swinging for the fences, swinging for home runs in the fall. I have a theory. It's a dumb brain theory that probably doesn't mean anything. But based on watching these past 2 years of the playoff runs the Phillies have been on, I feel like the electricity at the bank, the like fan atmosphere that's so crazy when they go on these like crazy hot home run streaks, the past two postseasons, that when they get a little bit cold, the players on the team like they're trying harder to hit those big home runs to like recapture that like, enthusiastic, energetic, energy that's in the stadium instead of kind of maybe being a more disciplined hitter because of like how much it can jolt the team and the city. It probably doesn't really make sense. I know baseball's like a lot harder game than that, but I feel like they get so caught up in the energy of the stadium that when they go a little bit cold, they kind of like turn harder to try and hit more home runs instead of just playing their game. I don't know if that makes any sense, but
No,
that's what I've
absolutely. I think
surmised.
whether it's that they're actually just trying to hit home runs specifically, but it's absolutely that. You can see it so obvious with the Phillies that the second that they're cold, especially because the absolute shift from where they were to like when they were cold, you know that then all they can do is over try. And you can just see it. And I'm like, I don't blame them. Like, I get it. You think like we were just doing this, like let's just do it. But you as a fan is always like, oh my gosh, like can you just work a walk? Like just try to hit it small. I don't know. But yeah, it's definitely that. I think especially like you said, I think the fans and atmosphere definitely add to it where it's like, oh my gosh, I need a hit right now, you know?
Yeah, well, I think it's just like it's so free flowing and so contagious in those postseason games at home when they are hitting home runs that like you said, it seems so easy that when it's not flowing that way again, I feel like there's just like a a little tick in their brain, like we'll just hit another one and get everyone going. Just
Yeah.
hit a solo shot when it's like, hey, just like maybe like hit a single, hit a
Yeah.
double in the gap, like just get on base so we can start something going. Because
Yeah.
I think what like, and I saw it, I think in the biggest example to me was the run 2 years ago to the World Series. Like that Cardinals game that started the run, that was
Yeah.
all small ball baseball. That was
Yeah.
like hit by pitches, little hits, steals, stuff like that. And then you compare it to like the end of the World Series against the Astros. Like it seemed like there wasn't even an attempt to do anything to just like stay alive. It was all big slings. So
Yeah.
again, I don't
That's
know if
great.
that's like managerial from Rob Thompson or just kind of the players getting caught up in that energy. I'm not sure what it is.
I think it's more in their heads. Like I feel like obviously I'm not there. I hope that the managers, I would just imagine that they're telling them like, calm down, like do this, do that. And I feel like they just can't help it. Like I think baseball's just such a mind game.
Yeah, and I feel like it's such an oversimplification of being like they just want to hit home runs because it's so difficult to hit a
But it's
baseball.
obvious.
But also, you're right, it is such a mind game. If there's like even that little thing in the back of your brain that's like, I could get a hit, but like, man, I would love to just hit a bomb right now. That
Yeah.
little like mentality change can really shift the whole at bat.
Yeah. Like I mean, you even just go back to the Trey Turner of it all where he was clearly trying so hard and that made it worse. And then, you know, you would think that us all like standing and cheering for him would make him want to, but I think that helped him chill out to be like,
Yeah.
that's what we all say. It's like, oh no, you don't have to like earn it. Like we're here for you. Like it's okay. And then that helped him kind of boost him to hit the home run. But that can even, like you said, work the other way where like you have the whole stadium getting quiet because you're not hitting a home run, and then they're like, I need to right now. Like so
Yeah.
it's all like it's all mind game for sure.
Yeah. I didn't realize with Trey, because obviously I didn't watch him as much until he became a Philly, but he's right up there with Nick Castellanos of like when he's cold, man, he'll swing at anything in the ballpark. It gets rough with those two guys.
Yeah, it's like I said, like I remember after like this summer before 23, like my dad and I would be like, Castellanos will be back. It'll be fine. Now I'm like, maybe he was back and that's just him as a player. Like I think we're just always gonna get like he's on this month and he's off the next month, and that's fine. But it's just obviously a lot harder to watch when it's in a playoff series and you go from Mr. October to Mr. Strikeout. Like, yeah.
Yeah. He's tough. Who's maybe an underrated or low key player you think will be a difference maker this year if they perform?
I'm excited for Kirkering and for why does his name just escape me? It's pitcher Sanchez?
Yeah, Sanchez.
Okay, yeah, I was like mixing names. I think both of them are like, of course we remember Kirkering because how he came up, but he's obviously still so young. So I would love to see him continue. And then I think Sanchez was also one that we got a small sample size, but he was really good. Where like I loved the way with those two specifically, we came in like the Braves and these different big games. We were like, oh, look, we're going to throw this at you. You're not expecting it. Like, yeah, I know you know Wheeler, but you don't know these two. If we can just have them continue to improve and be good, that could be such a weapon for us, because especially right now, like we're rated as like top bullpen, which I know is hard to believe. But and I don't necessarily believe it, but I'm like, if you have these like low key guys no one's thinking about really show up, I think that's such a difference maker.
Well, I was going to ask you about that. The MLB preseason rating giving the Phillies the number one bullpen in the MLB. I Obviously they have a lot of good bullpen pieces. They were unrated in their preseason rankings the past 5 years, and now they're number one. What
Yeah.
were your thoughts when you saw that MLB ranking?
Well, I think so I'm a big fan of the High Hopes podcast. I don't know if you listen to them,
Yeah,
but they said it once because they were discussing this, and obviously they're instantly like, "What?" But then they were like, "I think if you take a step away, like we're too in it to be like." I say it all the time. I'm like, "Oh, like a few more days so the Phillies like make me upset every day, like because I'm just get too into it. So like they're always gonna make me upset, or I'm just gonna get like way too like peeved. But I think when you take a step out of it, you see it because you have 2 aces, which not everybody has, and 2 aces that play consistently, which is important too. Like, I know Nola, like, had his time last year, but at least, like, we did have him, like, the whole season,
yeah,
and they go deep into the innings, which is a big difference because I hear about, the Rangers just won the World Series, and, like, 2 of their biggest pitchers, like, they know one's not gonna be on when the other is on, and they may not even play, like, we're not in that situation. And then you have, Ranger, who has been like one of the best playoff pitchers in the past few years. And then if you're considering everyone being on, like you have Alvarado, who's awesome. Sir Anthony, if he can be himself, like and then I just mentioned these younger guys and no one's even thinking about that did really well last year. And then we've added like, we'll see how Turnbull does. He did well in spring training um and I think, we have I'm not just gonna name the whole bullpen, but like when you
yeah.
go back looking over them, you're like, "No, like, they are pretty decent." Like, most of them, I'm like especially now that we've made some changes, 'cause I think the ones that would really sketch you out, like, we don't really have anymore. Um, it's a pretty good place to be. Like, I think most of the time when our pitchers are up, you're like, "Okay." I mean, it's not like Greg Soto, which we'll see what happens there, but, like,
Yeah.
you realize when you step out of it that we are a pretty good bullpen.
I think that's a good point. I think if you've been a Phillies fan for a long time, you're just like a little traumatized and you've seen
Yeah.
just so much bad bullpen play, the past decade or so. And
Yeah.
it's been getting, incrementally better each year. And last year, the bullpen was relatively solid. You take out, some Kimbrel performances and other things. It was a pretty good bullpen in terms of like where it stood in the league. And
Yeah.
so the additions they made, the decisions they made, I can see it. I just think, yeah, part of that just being a Phillies fan, you're too much in it. I also just feel like straight to number one. I don't know. It just gives me like bad energy. Like maybe put us like three. It's like we're third best. Like I feel like
Oh,
there's like a lot of like you're putting a lot of expectations up there to go from like they're not even a top five to like they're the best. It's like well,
yeah,
hold on.
I absolutely would rather, and usually we live this way, be like underrated. I love to fight with people and be like, "What do you mean the Phillies aren't like? Why would you not pick us to win the National League again?" But like, I rather be that way because it's a lot more fun when you, mess up
Yeah,
everyone's party.
you
Uh,
can be the underdog. That's the Philly way.
yeah, it's always better.
Well, on that same note, there's been discussion this offseason about based on, who they kept and who they didn't sign, all those things. Should this team have championship expectations? Should they be looked at as a serious World Series contender? I want to know your thoughts on that.
Absolutely, I think I'm not surprised that the league doesn't like respect us because I think they just see us as like they just get hot at the right time. They're just not like actually built to win the whole thing and I totally get that. Like last year even more I was like, why aren't we getting more respect? But now I see it. I'm not surprised. But the team, they should, and I completely believe that they do. I think I like know like 100% that they had that taste of it. Then they had the taste of you felt even shorter when you were like, at the top of the world. That now I think that's all they care about and see is the World Series and winning that. And like I think that the league should respect us more. I'm not surprised that they don't. I get that you want to look at the Braves, you want to look at the Dodgers, like whatever. But I think the difference maker is if we start off better than we usually did, then people would start giving us a little more respect. But yeah, I think this team has their eyes on the championship, and that's it.
Well, good, and I think they should, and you're right. Where because of how good the Braves always are and will be again, all the signings with the Dodgers and everything, and how good they are, it's easy to kind of just lump the Phillies sort of in that maybe second tier of even National League teams. But if you look at their postseason record the past few years, well, they've fallen short of the ultimate goal and kind of like embarrassing fashion both times. Like they've
Yep.
done extraordinarily well in the postseason. Like they're a team that is built for the postseason when they're hitting. So I think they do deserve that sort of respect in terms of like, World Series contenders. Now, in your mind, so there's obviously they're a team that should be expected, but I guess what is your expectation? What is your, if they get to this point, in the postseason, I'll be satisfied. Anything less, it's, a failure of a year. Like what is that line for you?
I mean, I guess failure is a strong word, but anything
Not
less than a
failure,
World
but
Series, I'm going to be disappointed, especially after last year. Last year, so when I look back at 2022, it's all good memories. I have no sadness. That is just the best time of my life. Like I just love it. That is awesome. All good memories. Even if we lost, I don't care. Now last year, my good memories were tainted because the way they lost, and especially because I went to a few of the playoff games, and so when we headed to Arizona, I really thought we were winning it all. I was like, no question. Like, look at us. Like, it's our year. Everything's falling together. And so I think the big difference maker is like, how do you do it? Because I'm not gonna lie, I'm probably always gonna be sad or disappointed if we lose, but I think it's the way they did it that made it even worse. Like, you just completely screwed it all up, and like yeah, like just terrible. So I'm like, I don't know. If you're gonna lose, at least lose in the better fashion. But like anything less than a World Series is gonna be a disappointment to me. Just hopefully it doesn't it's not the worst type of loss you've ever seen. But I'm all in on World Series.
yeah, I think that's fair. I think in 2022, you could say, they fell short, right? They went on a magical run, they caught energy, and they couldn't finish the job, and kind of happens sometimes. Last year, they blew it.
Yeah,
They
that's
I like to say
exactly
they Sixers did. It was very Sixery
right.
of them, and because it was a team they're up on in the series, they seemed
A much
miles above them in
yeah,
every facet of the game, and then they let it slip. So I think I can understand that kind of holding down a negative taste and not wanting to see that happen again.
yeah,
Yeah, I'd say for me, I don't know. Baseball's such a weird sport that I just know any team can catch fire at any point.
exactly.
But like to say like, oh, they got to win a World Series, like we could see the reverse. They could have a better season than the Braves, and the Braves come and like knock us out in the playoffs. Like you just never really
Yeah.
know.
Mm-hmm.
But I think based on the roster, the talent they retain, that I think they should have those World Series expectations.
Yeah, and like I said, I'm realistic, especially as a Philly sports fan. I don't have the luxury of living my life as like a championship or nothing. But would be lying if I said I wouldn't be disappointed anything short. But I think my biggest hope would just be, can we just not lose in the fashion that we did? like I just
Yeah,
but you're right. And I think that's what really hurt about last season too. Is like you just beat the Braves. Like that was your second time. Like how many times can we do it? Is your fear.
yeah,
You know what I mean? So I think that's just what scares you, especially about last season. The way it ended is we went so long without even being in the playoffs that you're like, here we are in the NLCS again, and then so it just scares you that you're like, oh my god, like you just lost your opportunity. So, but I mean at the same time, it gives me I have trust in how we do in the playoffs, until we get cold. But like hopefully it doesn't happen.
yeah. No, I get that. It's kind of that feeling of like you're pushing your luck, or like playing with your food of like, you're only
Yes.
going to get so many National League Championship Series. Like you're not just going to be there every year. You're not the Chiefs in the AFC. Like it's not just going to happen every year. So
Yeah.
every time you get there and don't finish the job, you get nervous of like, well, who knows when if we'll be back, because anything can happen. So I definitely
Exactly.
get that feeling. What are your how do you think Bryce is going to do full year at first?
I mean, I always err on the side of optimism, especially Bryce Harper. I'm like, what do you mean? Like he's Bryce Harper and do anything. He's impressed me at first base. Like I don't really have any reason to feel like he won't do well. And let's also be real, it's Bryce Harper. Like I mean, even Reese, like everyone hated on Reese for the mistakes that he'd make sometimes. But I feel like if Bryce Harper makes a mistake, we're probably going to be like, it's okay, Bryce. Like, we love you. Like, what are you going to be mad about Bryce Harper? But he's given me no reason to doubt him. I know everyone was getting freaked out about him not playing as much in spring training and his back or anything, but I just have no reason but to like fully believe in the guy. Like, even last year, he came back from Tommy John surgery faster than anybody ever. And like ended up with what we ended up with, and so I just have no reason to doubt him.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat. It's Bryce Harper. I don't think there's anything that man can't do. I'll never be the one to tell him he can't. So
Yeah.
I think he'll be a great first baseman. I think having a full year of him kind of more active and hitting every day will be good. And yeah, I think his defense has been great. I mean, he's a guy who just like athletes his way through it.
Yes.
Whether he's a natural first baseman or that's like the skill that he naturally possesses, he's just going to be the athlete that he is and make plays that way. So I'm not too worried. And again, like even Reese, who we loved and was a good hitter, had his defensive issues at first. So I don't think he'll be any worse than Reese was defensively. So
exactly.
And then you have the power that Bryce Harper brings. So I think we're in good shape there. Are you you mentioned spring training with Bryce Harper not playing with his back. Are you a spring training person? Do you get up and do you watch every game or how into spring training are you?
I unfortunately don't have the access to all of the games, but when I do, I watch them when I'm at work. If I can, I put it on and I follow it all. Like I'm always checking what's up. But that being said, so I care, but I think it's because I care about the Phillies and I, excited for baseball. But I definitely don't take everything like so seriously. I think that like people can get a little too caught up in that of like, oh my God, like he hasn't hit a home run all spring training. Like, okay, it goes back to me being like, it's Bryce Harper. Like I'm not gonna be like,
Yeah.
I'm gonna give him the benefit of the doubt. But no, like if I had access to more of the games, I'd watch them. But I unfortunately, you know how that goes with local restrictions and things. But
Classic
yeah,
MLB. Yeah, I'm kind of anti preseason in general in all the sports. Not like in their function. Like I'm glad they're there, but I think just more in terms of like sports media coverage and the discourse that surrounds it. Like,
yeah,
and maybe it's just growing up in Philadelphia, as a Philly fan, I'm just like sick of every year of like every NFL preseason of like, oh, look who's taking the second string snaps in every spring training, and look who has 3 home. Like, it's to me, I kind of like it's been like so weighed down for me that I kind of have like really pushed back, and I don't really watch a lot. I stay up to date, but I kind of, for me, the season starts on opening day, and that's when I am locked in.
You nailed it with like living in Philly and they ruin it for you because every season, especially Philly media loves to freak you out and
They do
act like the world's falling. So, yeah, no, I'm the same way. I feel like the only reason I think it's important, especially with baseball, more spring training, I care about for the people who aren't our starters. Like that's where I'm like, oh, how's Mick Abel doing? Like I care about that, especially more with baseball than football. But like, oh my gosh, with the Eagles, like I only watch preseason because you're so excited for football, and then it just makes you so disappointed because it's not football. It's terrible. And then you're like, oh, so that's not what I was trying to watch. Okay.
I fall in the same trap every year for NFL preseason where I get excited, like, oh, Eagles are back on. And then I'll watch like 2.5 snaps of starters. And then the rest is just like fourth string guys competing for a spot
The worst thing you've ever
against
seen.
other fourth string guys competing for a spot. And you're like, this isn't fun to watch.
Yeah. Then you're like, okay, still have a couple more weeks. This wasn't fun.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Kelly, I want to talk a little bit of some of the other Philly teams. How are we doing on time? Are we in a good spot or should we wrap it? Okay. Yeah. Just making sure. I know. I don't want to keep ESPN waiting. Coming after me. Or Disney coming after me. That's even worse.
Yeah.
So there's been some other Philly teams that have been doing really well this season. You're a 4-for-4 fan. I think we need to give our flowers while they're not in the playoffs yet, but they've had a great season to the Flyers. And I'll leave the floor to you, the rink to you. I mean, what has your impression of this Flyers team this season?
I've just been so happy that they're good and fun to watch. They're in the best spot. Like I guess even as a fan that as excited as I am to see them doing so well, we like me and friends who talk about it are the belief of like, this is great. We're playing with house money because this is not the team. Like, we still have to focus on the future. And I love that because, you heard our king, Danny Briere, talking about that. And he stuck with it, but to a good amount of like, yeah, we're still working in the future. So we're going to trade Scott Lofton. We're going to make these moves that might hurt the team now, but work in the future. But that being said, still kept it pretty together. Like, you see, he wasn't like, let's just let this all go and sell.
Yeah.
Which is great. And here we are, like, even with all the injuries that they've suffered, still number 3 in the standings. And like, it's just been awesome because, as a Flyers fan, like, it's so long when you weren't even like watching because they're just so bad, and you didn't even want to support like the leadership of the team because you're like, this is garbage that you're giving me. So it's just great to be back in, and like, it's a fun time. And I'm telling people all the time, like, the Flyers are good, and no one like knows or even like believes me, and I'm like, no, trust me, like, look. And so I'm just excited for them to be in a cup run, even if, but like I said, it's fun because you're in a different place where you don't have the expectations of like, we need to win a cup. Like, I just like, it's just a fun place to be, and I love the vibes of the team. And I like Tortorella. I think he's doing a good job, even he makes some questionable choices. But I'm just like, yeah, it's just a fun place to be.
Yeah, they're definitely in that good spot where there's no expectation. So anything they do that is, exceeding that is just like such a gift.
Yeah.
And yeah, I'm very admittedly like, out of the 4 major men's sports, like, NHL is probably my least favorite. So whenever the Flyers are not doing great, which has been like most of my lifetime, I
Yeah.
definitely like can lose interest faster than I would if it were the Sixers or the Phillies or the Eagles. But on that flip side, when the Flyers are good, like, it's so captivating and it's so easy to get bought back
Yeah.
in, and it's so much fun. I feel like the energy around Philadelphia sports is on another level when the Flyers are good, because maybe there's sometimes that fourth sibling, it seems like, a little bit in the city. And
Yeah.
so when they're good, I feel like it really lifts up everything. I don't know if you feel the same way.
Yeah, definitely. And so my dad, like, he's from Philly, like, my family's from Philly, but my dad actually grew up, and like, the Flyers were probably like even his number 1 team. Like, he was a huge Flyers fan. And so I was always hearing about, like, I read his yearbook from high school, which funny, he went to the same high school you did. His
Oh, no way.
um yeah, yeah, what was the school? What school was it?
William Tennant.
Yeah, so that's where he went. I just always mixing it
Funny.
up. No, so he went to Tenet too. And so in his yearbook, people all write stuff that related to the Flyers because he's like, oh yeah, like, I was always going to games. I was always wearing like my jersey, like, as this thing. And so then now, flash forward, the Flyers have been so bad for a while that I've had friends in like my group that were from different places be like, oh, no one cares about the Flyers in Philly. And me and my other like friends who are Flyers fans are like, no, like, they really do. Like, we are a hockey city if they are good. And so that's how it feels right now. Is like, we are definitely a 4-for-4 city. You just have to
Yeah.
give. I can't blame people for not wanting to go to Flyers games when they're terrible. And also, more importantly, like, the ownership wasn't doing anything to fix it. Because then I'm like, no, I don't want to
Right.
give you my money for you to fail on me. Especially like, my dad would be so disappointed in like just the state of the program because he's like, we were such a good like, unfortunately not with the cups as much, but like at least respected, to then fall so low. So I'm just glad we're back in the lineup. And it's funny because I watch Flyers games and it's like the broadcasters don't even know that we're doing well. They're all like, wow, like, the Flyers are number 3. It's like they don't even know. And it's like we're almost done with the season's pretty late now. And I'm like, yeah, pay attention. Like, look up.
Yeah, no, it's been such a surprising season. And yeah, so right now I've been following closely. They're 2 points ahead of the Caps for like that 3rd spot in their division. And I'm
Mhm.
pretty sure like the wild card, they would, like, if they lose the 3rd spot, they would like not make the wild card spot. I think, if I was looking at the standings right.
I
Um,
was just looking at all this the other day because hockey playoffs are weird. Right now
yeah,
we would play the Hurricanes in the first round because they're at number 2. So I
right.
know that, but I'm hoping, like, we've been doing pretty well at staying at our spot, and so I'm just hoping we keep it up. I know it's tough with the injuries, but I hope we keep the wins coming.
Yeah, with these, like, the low expectations of the season, if it like comes down to the wire and they just miss the playoffs, like, where, how would that hit you? Would it be like, oh, whatever, like, yeah, it was, we're playing with house money, or was it like, man, we could have just made a run and see what happens?
It would definitely be a bummer because I feel like we've been in that playoff spot for so long now that me and like friends are like, oh yes, like I can't wait to watch playoff hockey. But no, it wouldn't be like the most devastating thing in the world because I know that they've not only like we're just not supposed to be this good, but like I said, I keep mentioning like we really have struggled with injuries. We lost like our whole defense at one point. That it's like I've just been proud of the way they've kept winning with that. That like I couldn't be like devastated, but I it would be a bummer because they have been in that spot for a while. So I'm excited for them to play in the playoffs, hopefully.
Yeah, I hope they make it just kind of on the point I said earlier, just like the energy it brings the city, and if you can get at least a home hockey game or two in Philly, even if they're a first round exit, like I think that'll just like do so much good in terms of just like changing the energy and momentum for this Flyers team moving forward, and where they something they can build off of. And actually, I had a take the other day that I feel like Danny Briere, because he's this former player who had such a storied career with the Flyers. We're a city that loves its GMs because we're all in on what's happening with our teams. I think if Briere turns the Flyers into a contending team in the next couple of years, I think he could go down as one of the most like revered GMs in Philly sports history. I don't know if you agree
Absolutely.
with that.
Absolutely. We barely like even the changes he's made now, me and my friends are always like, "Oh my gosh, like our king Danny Briere, like we love him so much." But you're right, like the difference of like that's kind of a dream as a fan, right? For like obviously your GMs to do a good job and you to win things, but when that is mixed with the fact that it's like one of your favorite like players, like that's just awesome. Because I love when like Wayne Simmons just retired, and then it's like,
Yeah.
here's him like playing with Danny, or like how he used to play with Couturier. And it's like, or did you see that video that was going around? I guess it's from I think it's like an HBO special they used to do, and it's like how Sean Couturier used to like live in Danny
Yeah.
Briere's house. Like, I'm like, that's just crazy. Like, I love that.
Yeah, it'd be like if Chase Utley like became the GM of the Phillies. It'd be like, oh my god, any positive move that's done, it's like you're our king. Thank you, thank you.
Chase Utley does anything, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I love you because he's my favorite ever. But like right now, have you heard the talk of Bryce kind of like putting down that because he's king panderer. He's always
Yeah,
like, I love Philly, I'm gonna be in Philly forever. He even dropped that he's like kind of said something about ownership, and we're like I wouldn't be surprised if in the future we get Bryce like involved in the front office for real.
yeah, I could see it. I mean, I think no matter how much he wants to deny it, he is the king of pandering and he knows what he's
Oh,
doing.
love it.
But I think it's like like 95% like in good faith, like he means what he's
Oh,
saying, and he's
absolutely. I
he's
believe.
pandering like because he believes in what he's saying, and so I could
Yes.
see him. He's already really doubled down and wants an extension on his, 12, 13-year contract, which is crazy. But I could see him whenever he retires or even like towards the end when he's, playing in his late 30s and 40s, wanting a stake in ownership, wanting to be involved in the team and just like being a figure in the city. Cause I really do think he's found his home here. I mean, you've seen him like
Yeah.
do the interviews where he gets emotional and he's crying, talking about it. And he's not faking that, he's not like an actor or
No.
something. I think he really means it.
Yeah, when I say panderer, I definitely like it's more of a joke because when I see other like I just said it about a different I said about Saquon. I was like, oh, he went to the Bryce Harper school of pandering. Like, but I with Bryce, 100% I believe it. Like, and I mean, call me a fool, but when he says that, I believe it and I see it because you're right. You can't fake the emotion that he has. So I just think of any current Philly athlete that I believe would like stay for here forever and be in like front offices and stuff. I'd put it for Bryce for sure. I do see that happening.
Yeah, no, he definitely means it. He just knows what buzzwords to say. That's where his
Yes.
pandering, expertise comes into play. But he means what he's saying. He knows
Yeah.
how to craft it to tug the heartstrings.
Exactly.
All right, really quickly, and we'll wrap up with the Phillies. But how much have you been monitoring the Sixers situation since the Embiid injury?
The Sixers.
Side tells it all.
I feel like that's all I need to say. Um, it's just unfortunate. I feel like they're cursed. Nothing can go right. They're like, they're like. Think of them like like family, like a cousin or something, where it's like, oh, I might not like you all the time, but like I still love you because you're family. Like that's how I feel with the Sixers. Like this make me so mad. Coming into the season, I was like, I'm so done with them. Like, I'm not even gonna watch. Like, I'm so done with them. The way the last season ended. But then we fired Doc, and then like got rid of Harden, and so then I was like, okay, like my least favorite things are gone. And then I really liked how Nurse was doing, and like from the jump, we had good vibes and we were playing well. So they brought me back in, and then of course Embiid was doing so well, and then he got hurt. So now I'm just like, wow, why can't we just have anything? So hopefully he can come back. But I would be lying if I said that I think that really means anything. Like I don't. Like, I don't think that Embiid's going to come back and everything's going to be okay. So I've just kind of marked the season up as over. Not going to lie to you.
Yeah, I'm almost in the similar line of thinking. I've said like, and we'll never truly know like the status of his injury. They keep that stuff so private. But to me, like if he's rushing his recovery process in the slightest, I say don't play him. Like sit him out
Exactly.
the rest of the season. Let Maxey try and do his best, as a low seed and see what happens and let him grow from that. I just like don't see any point in having yet another year with a not 100% Embiid trying to, this time not fight through injury, but now fight through like recovery
Yeah.
and, getting bounced out early. To me, that's just not worth it.
Yeah.
Now on the other side, like if the timing lines up and he like, playoffs or not, like would be ready to go per his doctors, sure, play him and see what happens. But just they keep pushing. They said end of March. Now they're saying maybe first week of April. And so he might play like a week of games and then come in the playoffs. And just like, I don't know, to me.
Yeah.
And like, I don't know, the Celtics are so good this year and the Nuggets look great again. Like just the risk reward to me. I don't know if it's there again. If he's 100%, then you have to play him. But to me, the risk reward's not high enough.
Yes, everything you said, I completely agree. Like you said, I've been like, oh, good. Like Embiid comes back just in time to like lose the Celtics, like and that's not me trying to be negative. I'm just being real because it's exactly what you said. It's the risk versus reward. Like I'd rather you stay good for next year and hopefully like do something then.
Yeah, I'm curious, just like because working at ESPN, I know you guys are like mostly doing work, but you said there's like kind of that like almost sports bar atmosphere. What is like the consensus around ESPN or the people you work with about like the Sixers or the Flyers or these Philly teams from just like a general, like opinion basically? What do they say about these teams, if at all?
Mind you, people I talk to, this is just other 20-something people watching sports, so that does not reflect the opinion of ESPN.
Sure.
So with the Flyers, people just don't even know that they're doing well or paying attention. Like I feel like I'm always telling them that they're doing well, and then I guess people just don't think that like means anything. And then with the Sixers, I just get the regular like Embiid's not to win anything. Like you get it. Like there's a lot of people who just don't like Embiid. They don't think the Sixers are going to do anything, like stuff like that. I feel like that's most of the opinion. And then right now with them not playing, they're just kind of like forgotten about. Like at least from a fan standpoint, they're always still mentioned on the TV and included. But I'm like, yeah, a lot of people I talk to just don't think Embiid's like gonna amount to anything with us, or they think we should trade him and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm. All right, it's kind of what I figured. Just was curious, just what just a group of sports fans from kind of all backgrounds. What's the general consensus about these Philly teams, and it sounds like it's what I expected. So.
Yeah, and then baseball, it depends if people care, and then but I think most people like aren't gonna dismiss the Phillies. They just act like they're not as good as other teams, like the entire media.
Sure. All right, I want to end with the Phillies again. I want to ask give you a prediction question, but first I want to circle back to something I forgot to talk about. That's very near and dear to my heart. I'm sure it is to you. How are you processing the end of Dollar Dog Night?
I've never been to a Dollar Dog Night. I can't even
What?
pretend I have. No, I mean, like I said, I didn't like live in Philly for
Sure.
most of my life, so I didn't go. And then honestly, like last season when I was living in Philly, I was like, what? Sign up for that chaos? I don't know. I'm not surprised they got rid of it at all because the way people were acting in the past, I was like, they're definitely getting rid of that. But it's definitely upsetting. It's obviously upsetting, and I do think it's funny and sad how people are reacting to it. Especially the fact that they try to do buy one, get one free as if it's like the same thing.
Yeah,
But I'm not,
I
I
think
just can't say I'm surprised.
I think it's morally shameful what the Phillies organization is doing. I'm sure part of this is just like my childlike memory, like not remembering it correctly. But I feel like I used to go to a lot of Phillies games as a kid. I feel like there was like a dollar dog game every other month, it seemed like.
Yeah,
And
it
in
used
the
to be like,
past, it's been like 2 times a season. And so
yeah.
to me, I think that's why the chaos ensued. A, because the Phillies just started getting good again, so there's more people in the stadium, and there's like 1 or 2 times for these dollar dog nights. So I think the solution to mitigate all the chaos is actually more dollar dog nights.
That,
That
honestly, I that sounds crazy, but I totally get it because I do think people would probably like they wouldn't treat it as novel and act all crazy because it only happens once. But I think a big part of it too is the fact that there were so many people than there probably wasn't when you were a kid.
yeah,
But
I
yeah,
don't
it's
know.
such a bummer. I think even if people throw it, like unfortunately, like I wish that didn't mean that they had to get rid of it because I do think it's just a part of tradition, you know.
Yeah, I don't know. The buy one get one isn't doing the same thing for me, but I don't know.
No,
It we'll be fine. Phillies will be okay. Last question for you, Kelly. Thank you so much for catching up and taking the time to be
yeah, of
on here
course.
with me. Just give me your season prediction. You don't have to give me like a win total if you don't want to, but maybe a rough win total or where they fall
Yeah.
in the East or where they go in the playoffs. What's your if you were to outline do your old school Sports Illustrated prediction where the Phillies would land this year? What would it be?
Um, if I'm being completely logical with it, I think that we end up second in the division behind the Braves. I hope we get to like 90 wins. I hope we get more, obviously, but I feel like around 90. Like I think we hope for like a 95, 96, but I feel like we're probably gonna hit 90. And then uh and then yeah, probably like that first wild card similar to last season. That's just where I feel like we'll end up again. And I just hope that we so I think that like kind of the outline of it sounds similar to last season. I just hope that we're better in between. Like I hope we don't start off 1-5 and things like that. And I do feel like we'll be like a little, well, like it'll be a slight upgrade better. But I think that in the end, like the shell and the record will look similar. Um, and then I don't know what happens in the playoffs. I can't look that far now.
I like it. Do they play opening day on Thursday? And if they do the Phillies start the season with a win?
God, I hope so. Not only because he need to win, but like it's Spencer Strider. Like, can we please light him up? Uh, I don't know. Is the weather supposed to be bad? I know I've heard it's rain, like it's supposed to rain, but I haven't looked at like how serious that is.
Yeah, I've just been seeing like reports of people being like, "Oh, it might be moved. Can we know if it's being moved?" Like just wanting to get like a hold on it. I don't think it will
Yeah,
be. I doubt it. It has to be
I
pretty
hope
bad. But I
not.
know it's like a couple of days out where they're like there might be a storm moving in, and so they're just saying like, "Hey, if you're gonna move it, let us know now." But I
Yeah,
don't. I think it'll
that'd
play
be
on
so
Thursday.
our luck. You're so excited for the season, and they're like, "Oh, it rains." Like, that's honestly why I think it might happen, just because that's the kind of thing that would happen to us.
Or just a rainy, sloppy, gross opening day.
That's fine too. Maybe Spencer won't do as well then.
Maybe not. Maybe he'll be slipping and sliding and throwing some junk balls out there. Who knows?
I know he usually lights us up in the regular season, but I'm just hoping that like I'm assuming that we'll have a pretty packed house for this one. So I'm just hoping we'll get some like Red October like magic going.
That'd be fun. It's always just like it means nothing, but like winning that first game, the opening day game, just gives you so much like positive energy and like enthusiasm to going
Yeah,
towards the rest of the season. So it's always
because
such a good start.
the way we ruined it last season still lives in my head. So you can't act like it doesn't matter.
No, it matters. That's a good point. That's a good point.
Yeah.
Well, Kelly, thank you so much again for joining me. I can't
Thank you
wait
for
for the
having me.
Phillies season. I keep doing great work in ESPN. I'm sure you're
Thank
crushing it over
you.
there, and it's been a blast.
Yes, thank you so much. And thank you for having me on the show. Big fan.
Let's
Yeah, this is great. Go Phils.
go, Phils. Thanks, Kelly.